defining what our schools are, what are public charter schools, and the messaging that we should be using to help other advocates, other people who are strong-willed in mind about the education of children, understand what these schools are and get behind that messaging. We'll work on how to engage with lawmakers, how to tell our story and engage over social media and build relationships. And one of the most important things, right, we'll build relationships and connections with each other so that we can advocate across the state. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Harry Lee, our president and CEO.
Thank you, Jasmine. I really appreciate it. And Jasmine is our Director of Parent Engagement at the association and will be really leading our parent engagement efforts. It's great to be here. My name is Harry Lee, and I am the president of the New Jersey Public Charter Schools Association. And more importantly, I am the father of 3 kids, ages 10, 7, and 4. And so if I get interrupted during this, I'm going to apologize in advance. It happens often. But I'm excited to be here with you today for session 1, which is Charter Schools 101, an overview of the political environment. Before we start, a few housekeeping items. This session is in webinar format, so you can chat with one another. So please send questions through the chat or through the question box at any time, and we can answer them towards the end of the webinar. You will not be able to unmute yourselves due to the number of folks on the call. And right now we're at 73 and climbing here. And this will also be interactive. We have several poll questions for you, so hopefully you can participate in this training through answering some multiple choice questions. And after this session, you will be able to define what a public charter school is. I'm going to share some data so you can recite key facts and figures about public charter schools. You will identify key decision makers and how high stakes charter school decisions are made about your child's school. You will also understand how politics play a key role in public education and New Jersey's public charter schools. And this isn't only about the kids, unfortunately. It is often about external factors that I think everyone should be aware of, which will be hopefully interesting to you and not depress you. It's an important goal, especially these days. Next slide. So a little bit about who we are. Are you able to move it, Jen? There you go. The New Jersey Public Charter Schools Association is a membership organization and the statewide advocacy voice that supports charter schools across New Jersey. We believe that every child in the state of New Jersey should attend a public school that works for them, and we need more creative options in our public school system, including public charter schools. And our mission is to advance policies, that's legislation, regulations, and state budget, that help charter schools do what they do best. And you've experienced this, which is to provide students across New Jersey with a great education. And what policies do we care about? We want fair per pupil funding for charters. Charter schools don't get money for school buildings. So facilities funding is a huge one. And we also want to allow charter schools to be flexible and creative with less bureaucracy. And so these good-looking folks are our team members. I introduced myself already. You already met Jasmine, who is our Director of Parent Engagement. You see that handsome young man, TJ Best, who is our Director of Government Affairs. Olivia Tremble is our Chief of Staff. Jen Coulter is our Director of Communications. Brian Diamante is our Director of Data and Research. And so in future meetings, you'll be hearing from several of our team members. All right, so we would love to know who's here. We're going to have several poll questions throughout this so you can engage and we can make sure folks are paying attention. So this is the first one. Which city and town are you representing today? And where is your child attend school? Let me see if I can launch this poll here. All right, so I'm going to give you 30 seconds for this poll. Where is everyone from? All right, you guys got 10 more seconds to answer this poll.
Answer in the poll, not in the chat box.
Yeah, I hope y'all can see the poll. I see it going. It's good. It's great. 40% from New York. Awesome. Thank you all for responding. And so here are the results for this. Newark at 41%, which is actually 40% of the charter sector in the state. Patterson, a lot from Hoboken. Thank you all for coming. All right. Next slide, Jasmine. All right, thank you. Thank you all for being here. And let's first define public charter schools. The most important part of this is that charter schools are public schools. Most people don't know that. When they hear charter schools, they think private schools or selective schools. And so we have a major information problem. And the association actually changed our name last year to add the word public into it because of the lack of understanding that charters are public. So when you discuss public education, I ask that you don't compare public schools to charter schools, rather use the terms district schools and public charter schools. So that absolutely matters. Do not say my child used to attend the public school and now they attend the charter. We'd rather you say my child used to attend the district school and now they attend the public charter school. It's really important, that language. And charter schools are tuition-free public schools run by nonprofit organizations, open to all students regardless of where they live, their race or ethnicity, income, or academic ability level. There's no tests, no entrance exams, or other special requirements to gain admission into a charter. Public charter schools, they have to comply with a lot of rules and regulations, all the rules and regulations related to student health and safety, state curriculum mandates, civil rights, special education, and state testing. And I would argue that public charter schools are the most accountable public schools in the entire state of New Jersey. Now, while charter schools are public schools, there are some differences between district schools and charter schools. And so you see this chart here. I'll go through each one. Public charter schools are much more accountable. They run on 5-year contracts and can be closed if they're not performing well. Districts don't have contracts with the NJDOE, and there is less accountability, I would argue. On governance, public charters are governed by a nonprofit board that is typically appointed. District schools are governed by an elected school board. So that's a major difference. On operations, public charter schools are typically not unionized and have more flexibility on curriculum, budget, and staffing than district schools typically. And although some charter schools are organized, are unionized, district schools have collective bargaining agreements that may limit their flexibility, for example, on professional development or length of the school day. On flexibility, there are some flexibilities for charter schools, although much less so in New Jersey than other states. How teachers are evaluated, for example, there's some flexibility in New Jersey. And taking a step back here, the whole idea of chartering is this trade-off between autonomy or flexibility and results-based accountability. So that's the whole idea of why charters exist. And on funding currently, charters on average receive $4,200 less per pupil compared to district schools. Charters also do not receive facilities funding. And districts have more capability in terms of levying taxes, and they get access to facilities aid from the state. And so those are some of the differences. And charter schools were created to increase educational options for parents, to increase accountability, to create new opportunities for teachers, and to increase flexibility and innovation in the classroom. All right, I'm gonna launch the next poll. All right, no, not that one. All right, so this is a question. How many charter schools currently operate in New Jersey? What is your guess here, all? It's fun seeing these numbers go up. All right, 10 more seconds. All right. So here are the results. The answer is 87. So 16 of you got it right. There's 87 charter schools in the state of New Jersey. All right, we will move on to the next slide. There we go. And so here are some facts for you. We have 87 charter schools in New Jersey serving 57,000 students. We have a very diverse sector. Charters are located in 40 different cities in 18 of our 21 counties. We have the most students in Newark and Paterson, Camden, Trenton, Jersey City, Plainfield, and Hoboken. 49% of all charter students in New Jersey are African American, 37% are Latinx, and nearly 3 out of 4 students come from low-income backgrounds. And about 10% of our students are special education students in New Jersey. And so I'm going to launch another poll here. All right, so how many students in New Jersey are currently sitting on charter school wait lists, hoping to enroll in a charter school? And so we have 57,000 kids in charter schools, but what is your guess on the number of kids that are on wait lists currently in New Jersey? All right, give it a couple more seconds here. All right, so these were your responses, and the answer is 36,000. There's a lot of students on wait lists in charter schools, and there are currently 36,000 students in New Jersey waiting to get into a high quality public charter school. All right, so the next slide is about performance. So how are charter schools performing? I'm not going to go deep into the data here. We're going to share this PowerPoint afterwards. But the bottom line is we have some of the best charter schools in the country. Charter students are 33% more likely to read at grade level and 44% more likely to do math at grade level compared to our district counterparts. Students of color are also thriving in charter schools. And all this data is on our website, by the way, if you'd like to see it. And we will share those fact sheets with you after the session today. The next slide is district performance in reading. And this shows that charters in urban districts are doing great in reading. The green bar is longer than the black bar, which shows how charters are doing better across every city shown: Camden, Trenton, Newark, Jersey City, Paterson, and Plainfield. And the next slide is just math. And it also shows the same trajectory here that yeah, charter schools are doing better in the city shown. And there's something wrong with the view. It's odd, but yes, the G was underneath. Thank you for that clarification on the spelling there. Next slide, Jeff. And I also wanted to highlight a recent study that came out of Stanford University. Newark charters were the highest performing in the entire nation. And so Credo is a very reputable organization. And according to their study, Newark charters posted student learning gains of 72 additional days in reading and 94 additional days in math annually compared to the state average in New Jersey. And we know that New Jersey has a very good public education system, and Newark charters are vastly outpacing the state in terms of student growth. And so that is an absolutely incredible accomplishment. Newark is the #1 charter sector in the entire country based upon these studies. Right. So we've established that charter schools are working. There are tens of thousands of kids on wait lists. And now we're going to get into the more interesting part of the training, which is about politics. Public charter schools operate within a system, and there are decision makers in government. And so we will discuss who decides whether or not charter schools can exist, how they operate, and how many students that they can actually serve. All right, so here's another poll question for you. I'm going to launch this one here. So who decides whether or not New Jersey's charter schools can exist, how they operate, and how many students they can serve? Is it the local board of education? Is it the commissioner of education, the state board, state legislators, local superintendent, or the federal government? Yeah, this is an interesting one. All right, I'll give it a few more seconds here. End the polling. And oh wait, there you go. So the answer actually is the commissioner of education. It is not the state board of education. The state board actually in New Jersey does not have a ton of teeth. They do regulations, but is actually the commissioner. It is one individual that is making a lot of these decisions. So the next slide, Jasmine, we're going to talk a little bit about this. All right, so it's really important to know how decisions are made, and these are the folks that we at the association try to influence to make sure charter policies are favorable. First, Governor Phil Murphy and the New Jersey Department of Education. New Jersey has one of the most powerful governorships in the country. The governor appoints the top official in the New Jersey State Department of Ed, who makes every single decision on charter schools, meaning that they make decisions on new schools and closing bad schools. It is not an elected board. New Jersey has one authorizer. And the governor also proposes an annual state budget that includes billions of dollars for public education. And as public schools, these decisions impact charter schools. So I actually used to work at the New Jersey Department of Ed. I used to be the director of the charter schools office and would report to the commissioner to make recommendations on charter schools. And I will tell you this, there are a lot of factors when making a charter decision. And yes, sometimes politics are involved. I could tell you some stories, but that is probably a different conversation over drinks. But I will provide you a few examples later on about how politics does play a role in this. And the second row here is the state legislature. There are 120 members of the state legislature. By the way, this is an election year for everybody in the state legislature in the fall. And so the legislature creates laws that impact all aspects of society, including public education. And we do our best to influence legislation at the state level and sometimes at the federal level. So the state legislature works with the governor to produce an annual state budget. And so we testify at budget hearings, and some of you parents have done that with us, and we try to influence that process. And the third row are local elected officials. And although they don't make formal decisions on charters, they can absolutely influence the process. For example, if a local school superintendent doesn't want a new charter school from opening, they can oppose that new charter school. They can discuss it with their state legislators. They can write a letter to the commissioner directly. And that happens all the time. As a former bureaucrat in the DOE, I used to get these letters all the time, and those can play a factor in decisions. So who else besides elected and appointed officials influence charter decisions? And we will raise our hands here at the association. We do at the association. We are an education advocacy organization. And so there are pro-charter groups and anti-charter groups. And the association and Jersey Can are pro-charter groups, the two most well-known. And then we also have anti-charter groups, including NJEA, which is the New Jersey Education Association, which is the teachers union, Latino Action Network, and Save Our Schools New Jersey. And so there are groups who want fair funding for charter schools and others that want a moratorium on new charter schools. But what we do is really try to influence the folks on the previous slide in terms of the state budget and legislation. And also the media plays a role in decisions on charter schools because it is often about narrative, and parents also are absolutely critical. And so that's why we are doing this training, because we need more parents to get involved to advocate for your kids. So I have a visitor. Hold on one second. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. I warned you that was going to happen. So here's some names you may recognize. You have here Governor Murphy, who appointed Commissioner Alan McMillan. The governor has been, I would say, neutral on charter schools. We have Senate President Sweeney from South Jersey, who is a huge charter champion. He is our biggest ally, and without the Senate President, we'd be in big trouble. The Assembly Speaker is someone who is learning more about charter schools. He is from Middlesex County. Senator Ruiz is a Senate Education Chair and hails from Newark and is a charter supporter. Assemblywoman Pam Lampett is the Assembly Ed Chair. She is from South Jersey in Voorhees and is also a charter supporter. And so these individuals are the most important folks that we talk to on a regular basis. I wanted to share two quotes with you that have resonated with me in this work. And if TJ, you want to jump in here too at some point to talk about your experience as an elected. But the first one is from our lobbyists, and we do employ 2 lobbying firms. And one of the first things she told me was, the only thing that matters in politics is money and votes. And the second quote comes from Shavar Jeffries, who you may know from Newark, and he spoke at our conference a couple years ago. He is the head of Democrats for Education Reform. And he said this to our school leaders: when you decided to open a charter school, you engaged in an act of political warfare. It is not simply enough to operate good schools. That's what I tell our school leaders all the time. You'd think it should be about kids, but it isn't. And I hate to depress you, but nobody cares about your student academic outcomes. Like, some people do, but some people don't. They're transactional. And so I'm going to give you a couple examples of this. And so here's the first example of money and votes and how important it is. And the NJEA, which is the teachers union, is the most powerful lobby in the state, full stop. I'm going to say this: I do not begrudge NJEA. They are very good at their jobs. My mother was a teacher. We all respect what teachers are doing during this time. And some of our charter schools are affiliated with NJEA, and we support all our schools regardless if they're unionized or not. But NJEA's job is to defend their members, which are teachers, and their job is not really to represent kids, and that's not what they were built for. And so they do a great job at what they do. And they receive over $130 million per year in membership dues, and a lot of that money is spent on politics. And they also advance a lot of anti-charter legislation. And so back in 2011, you may recall former Governor Christie clashed often with the teachers unions. And does anyone remember that? The media loved it. It was all over the news. And there was legislation that was passed that NJEA did not like for their 200,000 members, which was pension and health benefits reform. And so this passed under Governor Christie and was supported by the Senate president. And so in 2016, so they were not happy with the Senate president. In 2016, the Senate president refused to post a constitutional amendment that would have required the state to make full payments to their pension system. That also did not make NJEA happy. So what did they do? In 2017, we saw the most expensive state legislative race in the history of the United States. NJEA went all out to defeat Senate President Sweeney. $24.1 million was spent on a race, which was the largest in the history of the country. Sweeney still won. He won by 18 points. And so I would say today the relationship with the union and the Senate president is better, but this is all documented. This is the history I'm sharing. And so the reason I share this story is, if the Senate president lost in 2017, remember he's our strongest supporter. If he lost, your school may not exist today. There are groups out there that believe charter schools should not exist. And every day they wake up trying to destroy charters. It's a reality that we wake up to every day as an advocacy organization. And so, you know, there are a lot of big lawsuits that I'm not going to talk about here that are driven by anti-charter groups trying to end charter schools, like the Latino Action Network. And the people in place matter for policies on charter schools, and they matter for the existence of charter schools. And so really our goal as an association is to support those who support us. So I'm going to give you another example here. So these are just two very simple examples of anti-charter legislation. This next slide. The first is a moratorium on new charter schools. And there are folks that don't want any new schools to open. And so there were bills introduced in 2011, 2012. And local control is another big one. Jasmine, are you able to shift that slide? There we go. And there are anti-charter groups that want local school boards to determine if your school gets renewed, because as we learned, all charter schools run on a contract. And if that were to happen, there would be mass closures of charters, and they simply wouldn't exist. And the reason for that is, I'm going to give a very crude example of this. It is like asking Target to make a decision on whether Walmart should open down the street or stay open. Of course, they're going to say no. And so there are actual bills that are introduced into the legislature every year across the country on these two things. So these are two examples. Next slide. I also want to give you some hope here, right? And so I'll give you an example of a win for your child's school. And so this happened last year. And there was a new law that passed called Alyssas Law, which requires New Jersey K-12 public schools to have a panic alarm that is linked directly to local law enforcement. And so this law was signed to prevent mass shootings in schools. And so for some reason in 2020, the Department of Ed ruled that charter schools were not eligible for security funding. We were very upset about this. We acted quickly. We asked schools to send out a call to action to all parents and employees, and also met with our key legislative allies. In 3 days, more than 5,000 emails were sent to the governor's office, the department, the Senate president, and the Assembly Speaker. And to keep a long story short, we eventually received a line item in the budget of $4.03 million to pay for these panic alarms. So that is the power of grassroots activism. And we're going to have asks of parents to do that as well. All right, so our organization, the New Jersey Public Charter Schools Association, we are very involved in statewide advocacy. And there are a number of ways we try to influence those who make decisions. We started the Opportunity Now PAC and the 501c4, the Action Fund. These are separate organizations from the association, but those organizations can give directly to politicians. If you're interested in learning more, please email us. We have to keep that separate, but we will send out separate information to you on that. We also have individual meetings with many legislators and other key elected officials annually. We have monthly meetings with NJDOE. We regularly weigh in on education legislation. We testify at hearings and budget hearings. And TJ Best is our government affairs lead. He's amazing. We also contract with 2 lobbying firms. I don't know, TJ, if you want to share anything about this, but we're doing a lot of good work on state advocacy.
Yeah, thanks, Harry. Again, not to bore everybody, but as Harry said in the previous slide, there's a lot of effort that's being put into closing charter schools down, and mainly coming from the NJEA, which is without question a powerhouse, and they have good reason to do it. And the reason being is because they support their members, which are teachers, not students. And the whole purpose around charter schools are to provide parents and students with the best educational option for them. If that educational option means staying later in the day, having a longer school year, a longer school day, implementing new and different and innovative approaches, requiring additional professional development, ongoing professional development for their teachers throughout the year so they can stay up on it. The NJEA doesn't want that to then be implemented in all of the public schools. So to stop that, they want to shut us down. And unfortunately, we have to combat against that. I wish that wasn't the case, but it is the case. And we're working extremely hard, but we cannot do it alone, which is why we created this group, and which is why we desperately need you, the parents, to talk about the benefits that you and your child are receiving by being in a public charter school. So I know this sounds like an infomercial, but thank you so much for joining us today. And also, please make sure that you stay involved, and we're open to all of the questions that you have when this is over very shortly. Thanks, Harry.
Yeah. Next slide, please. And so just to highlight again what our goals are, we want to prevent anti-charter legislation from being passed. We want to get more pro-people funding for charters. We want to get facilities funding for charters. And we want to increase flexibilities for schools to adapt so they can focus on educating children. So next slide, which is slide 30. So this may seem a bit overwhelming. A lot is happening behind the scenes. And so you may be asking yourself, I'm just a parent, what can I do about this? And my response to that is, yes, one parent can absolutely make a difference. I am in many, many meetings with legislators. I've seen firsthand how parents can change hearts and minds. I've seen Jasmine do it in 2 meetings. Legislators care about their constituents, right? And so people sharing their stories is more powerful than data. I can give you all the data in the world about why our schools are great. Sometimes it doesn't matter. It is about a parent talking to a legislator that can really break through. And you all are a voting block as well. And so part of this training is we want to get our parents in front of legislators. And so we will train you up. We want to talk about that in future sessions. So I'm going to turn it over to Jasmine to discuss the next few slides on the ladder engagement. These are the types of things that we want you guys to engage with in the future.
Thank you, Harry. So as Harry said, I know it goes through as a parent, you're like, what can I do? This one parent, how can I really change things? And as we look at the ladder of engagement, I thought it was so important for us to walk out of this meeting with some ideas about what we can do as individuals and as collaboratives. So number one, provide your contact information so that you stay up to date. And I'm going to kind of skip around here, things that I've done in the past, things that I've seen to be effective, things that we need immediately. Number two, your Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you will be surprised how movements are started by people who are passionate about a cause, sharing it with their family and friends, and then sharing it with their community, and hearing, politicians hearing that and wanting to be responsive to it. Number three, I would say the op-eds and the connection with your school, sharing your charter story. Often we each have a unique story about how we came to this school. I sometimes when I think about mine, I'm drawing the tears because I remember being in a room in high school with charter students and wishing that I could be in that school, but just not having the understanding of how to get there. And then years later, having the opportunity for my children to be able to go to that school. So last but not least, we some of you I've already reached out to testify at some of our budget hearings, to come to Trenton with me, to post the image or a picture of your kids, to tell your charter story on video, to meet with a communications director for me so that you can tell your story and they can write about your story. I'll be reaching out to more of you about that as I get to know all of you. I love people. I love our charter community. I love our community, but it's our stories are so unique and I love to hear them. So I'm always reaching out to connect. But today I'm going to ask you specifically to do two things when you walk away from this meeting. Number one is to take note of the next meeting coming up on April 26th. This is going to help us to formulate our story and make sure that the messaging is being shared consistently. A lot of times I've heard stories from parents where they kind of get into this back and forth with district parents or district leaders about their choice to put their child in a charter school. And I think what's very important is that we believe in the education of all children. Most of us would march the street if we could know that we would influence the district to implement some of the amazing things that we've seen work for our children. So when we share our message, we're sharing our message not just as charter parents, but as parents that believe that this is the benchmark for how education should be handled, and that our elected officials and our leadership needs to take note of that. So please come to the next meeting on April 26th. Next, I'm asking that you follow on Twitter or Facebook the Charter Association, your elected official. I will be connecting with you. This really helps us to build a community so that the message is consistent and it's being shared and it's being funneled. So please make sure that you follow the association, your school, the local lawmakers, other parent advocates, including myself and others that you may know on the call tonight. And I will be following up via email to talk to you about how that interaction is happening over social media, to make sure that we're all in a succinct in terms of messaging and influence, and to be a support to you as you start to influence your own specific silos of your charter environment in Trenton, in Patterson, Jersey City, Newark. So with that, I will turn it over to Harry.
Yeah, thank you for catching that. It is the Tuesday, the 27th, that we're going to have the next training. Sorry, I mistyped that. So I just want to do a quick recap. We're at 45 minutes in. Charter schools are public schools, all right? I think one takeaway is do not compare public schools to charter schools, rather use the terms district schools and public charter schools. And that's the definition. Public charter schools are tuition-free public schools run by nonprofit organizations open to all kids. The second takeaway is we know, and you know this, public charter schools are absolutely knocking out of the park for students and families. They're using their flexibility and creativity to provide high quality public school options for families, especially in our urban districts. And Newark has the #1 sector in the nation. Third, the Commissioner of Education appointed by the governor makes high stakes charter school decisions, such as whether to open a new school, expand a school, or close a charter school. I saw a question about the local board. They don't have any authority, although they may have influence over charter decisions. The state legislature creates laws that impact charter schools and public education generally. And politics play a key role in public education. It's really important to educate our decision makers And yes, parents can absolutely make a difference in advocacy. And so thank you for joining us. And we will